Sorry about my hair. It's a whole thing. Um, all right. Um, I know it's the last day of class. I figured I'd post a couple things for those of you. Most of you are just like, I just can't wait to get this paper done and be done with this. But um, I feel I'd feel guilty if I didn't, give you guys everything give you your money's worth. I hope you got your money's worth over the last month or so. So I'm going to talk about Key and Peele a little bit. Um, Thanks for your comments as usual. Um, the One of the things that I think Key and Peele does is with a lot of their sketches is they talk about um, they point out how our country, our culture has normalized these shitty behaviors, how they've normalized racism, and in in some cases homophobia and things like that. But obviously, race is a focal point for the show. Um, but the normalizing of racism, so like the the country music sketch, the Black Ice sketch, all talk about how the media sort of codes their language and their coverage and things like that to sort of reflect negatively on minorities and positively on white people primarily, or people, uh, rich people, or whatever it is, whatever it might be. Um, so those two sketches in particular are about the ways in which we have normalized racism and the way everything is sort of coded, I guess. Uh, and this speaks to the more you pull at that thread, the more you get into white privilege and how the fabric of our country is built on this stuff and critical race theory and all these kinds of things. Um, Sort of the whitewashing of our history and all this kind of stuff. So there's always that thread that runs through a lot of Key and Peele's stuff, which is, you know, important, obviously. The somebody brought up. I talked about the comparisons to Chappelle Show, and it's totally different time eras. Like Chappelle Show came out early 2000s, and kind of like I said, like changed the game, or maybe didn't change the game, but sort of um, elevated the game, maybe, or breathed new life into sketch because it had been SNL. Mad TV made a run for a while, but was kind of forgettable. And then here comes Chappelle, and um, someone made the point. Ahmad made this point about how uh, the comparison is kind of ridiculous. Not ridiculous. Obviously, you're going to compare the two, but something that Ahmad's comment made me think of was Key and Peele's a more complete show than Chappelle's show. Chappelle's show was let's dismantle these racial stereotypes and see what happens, right? If we really come after them. But if you watch the entirety of Chappelle's show, he's pretty tone deaf to issues of sexuality, women. He is very misogynistic. Um, he kind of misses. I shouldn't say misses because misses implies that he was aiming for it and didn't get it. He just he was super progressive. Chappelle is talking about race and dismantling those things for us and hoping that we got the point that it was all stupid and all based on, you know, ignorance and misinformation and things like that. And in that process, he kind of, he wasn't, Key and Peele have sketches about women, uh, about being gay. Their targets are more broad. So yes, they do pretty um, pointed racial commentary. They're also doing commentary about homophobia, as many of you pointed out. They're doing it about women. They're doing it about politics. They're doing it about all these kinds of things. And Chappelle was kind of a, he just had a different focus, but missed the boat again. I guess I shouldn't use the word missed, but was kind of tone deaf to a lot of these other issues that were going on at the time. Um, so I think Chappelle was a good show, but Key and Peele took, like most TV, they're like, let's do Chappelle show, but also address, you know, it'll be both of us and we'll address more than just the race issue, which I think is a good, obviously uh, a good thing. Um, so I have in my notes, um, why do we care so much about other people's sexuality? Like, why? um, most of us, most of our understanding of otherness, meaning anything different than us. So, a different sexuality, a different sexual orientation, a different race, a different gender, a different whatever is, you know, is tangential based on portrayals and stereotypes, like things that we see. It's like you see it in most of their sketches, they're really exaggerating these characters so that we see it, be like, oh yeah, so the gay, uh, the office homophobe sketch, which is almost a near perfect sketch. It's so good. Um, like uh, Key is the gay that we all. Oh yeah, I know. That guy is gay. That's the gay that we've sort of accepted. The sort of flamboyant, over the top, cartoonish portrayal of what it means to be gay. And if you're if you're watching that sketch for the first time and you're like leaning into that, and then all of a sudden the turn at the end is that Peele is also gay, but he is the exact opposite. So it's like helping to redefine these things for uh, for the culture is interesting, and they do it the same for blackness. It's like, what does black look like? What does gay look like? Well, it looks like everything else when you look at it from this perspective. Like nothing is a monolith. Like being, you know, there's so we're all, let's put it this way, we're all latent everything. Like when we're born, we have a little bit of everything in us: gay, straight, masculine, feminine, um, black, white, Asian, whatever. In terms of like the things we tap into, and the person you become, and how much or how little sexist, racist we all have that. How much or how little of those things that we tap into depends on where, a lot of times, where we grew up, our parents, our families, like our traditions, our religion, our, you know, our friends, our jobs, like our experiences. So we all have it all in us, in some way. And all those factors depend on how much of that comes out. So I suppose it's a nature and nurture, not not or. Um, and I think Key and Peele really um, tap into that. Who brought it up? It was Lou talking about the Office homophobe sketch. Like, the takeaway from that sketch is, gay or not, Key's character is an asshole. Like, just period. Like, there's two things that transcend all this shit that we've talked about all session: race and sexuality and gender and all these identity sort of issues. There's two things that transcend both of them, and actually transcend them, but unite them. That's that's assholes and stupidity. Like, there are dumb black people, there are dumb white people, there are dumb Asian people, there are dumb, and you can't. There are dumb gay people. Dumb doesn't discriminate, and neither does asshole. So those are the issues we should be focusing on, not the color of your skin. It's like, are you an asshole or not? Period. Like, if we use that category, if we were just like, okay, you're either an asshole or you're not, we'd have a lot less tension in the world. Um, and dumb stupidity. Like, you can't you can't beat that. And every group of people has stupid people, and every group of people has assholes. You know what I mean? Everybody poops. Now, everybody has, every group. Those are the issues. It doesn't matter. It's another thing that should unite us, I guess. I don't know. I'm getting lost in this, but um, being dumb and being an asshole are the two things that transcend identity. And I think that's a theme that Key and Peele puts out there, right? For sure. Um, why do we focus on the negative? Yeah. Why do we focus on the negative? Painting otherness as negative, right? That's that. Um, well, that's George Carlin talked about it, and we didn't do Carlin in this class just because we didn't have enough time. But he used to do a long bit about how, like, we focus too much on what divides us, right? When there are so many things that we could agree on that could unify us. And generally, this was Carlin's theory, it's the government, it's those in power who are invested in keeping us fighting about the color of our skin or who we like to fuck, or, right? Like, if we're focused on that, then the powers that be, can run away with all the money and the power and continue to have everybody, you know, just fighting amongst themselves. It's a distraction. And so, why do we focus on the negative? Like, that, one of my favorite sketches, um, and Aiden brought it up, was the last sketch. They're two rednecks. Someone's gotta say it, right? And everything they list is all these great things about, you think they're gonna say, all the negative things like about Mexicans and Asians and Native Americans or whatever it is, right? And they list all these great things that they've done and the 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 strengths of their communities and things like that. Like, why don't we do that? I mean, you rarely hear it talking about otherness in that way. So that sketch is chef's kiss on that one. Um, and I think it's because of that. It shows us like you were expecting them to be complete bigots, and they're open minded and thoughtful and right. Like even that stereotype could be different, right? And in some cases is. Um, but they play a lot with that idea. Let's see. I talked about coding before, like the way the media is coded, CODED, um, and how we, just our language and the lens through which we see the world is generally coded as racist and homophobic and all these kinds of things. Um, and a couple of you guys mentioned, um, but Jason specifically talked about uh, Luther, the Obama's anger translator. Like that's a perfect example of how the media codes blackness, right? So the implication is that Obama, once he became president, he wasn't allowed to be himself. He had to be the kind of black man that our country would tolerate or accept, right? He couldn't be angry, he couldn't wear the rings, like all the stereotypes that Luther sort of embodies is what Obama really wanted to do but couldn't do, right? And there's certainly a good amount of that did have to go on. There's another sketch I didn't put in there where Obama's like going through a line of people giving handshakes, and if it's a black person, he like dabs them up and gives them hugs, and the white person is like, okay, hello, yes, thank you. Um, just subtle stuff like that. I think they did some really interesting things with Obama, and the translator was a perfect example, right? Um, and they actually, if any of you seen it, Keegan Michael Key actually was he played Luther with the real Obama once. It was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Uh, can't remember what year, but it was literal Obama with Luther. I think it must have been when Obama. Maybe it wasn't. I can't remember. Maybe it was. Whatever. You can. It's on YouTube. It's really good when comedy sort of transcends culture like that. Um, the Caitlin brought up the Confederate reenactment sketch, which is that one's it's hilarious. It's another one that's like really well done and thoughtful. I think Key and Peele have a way of really finding the sweet spot on those types of sketches where it's like this could be done really poorly and not be funny or meaningful either. It can't could be neither of those things and just be like you missed it on that one. But they find a sweet spot with sketches like that, and that's perfect. Like that sketch is sort of a precursor to this big ongoing discussion or debate that we're having about critical race theory. Like, that sketch is basically critical race theory played out in this, this 3.5 minute sketch about, like, if we're going to do these reenactments, let's do these reenactments, right? Like, let's not whitewash our history anymore, because you never hear, you know, of that happening at these reenactments. We're like, well, if we're really doing it, like, let's really do it. And that's basically, that's a very watered down idea of the whole critical race theory. If we're going to teach history, let's teach the actual history, right? Let's not whitewash it and, try to, you know, talk about it in a way that it wasn't. Um, so yeah, Caitlin, I think pointing that out made me think of that. I'm like, holy shit, this is pretty ahead of its time. Um, Maybe not even intentionally, but ahead of its time in that, like, now it's this huge debate across the country about teaching critical race theory, and of course the right thinks it's a scam or something, and who, who knows what the hell is going on. But that that sketch, uh, among others, but that one's more pointedly about that whole idea. So you can see how Key and Peele really have, again, it's idea based, right? Like, I talked about that all session about, you think comedy starts with punchlines and jokes and funny, 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 but really good comedy starts with ideas first. And like, okay, how can we make this idea funny? And that's a huge challenge, right? Especially when we're talking about things as heavy as race and sexuality and gender and all these, all that stuff. So keeping it funny, keeping it pointed, and, you know, coming out on the other side, that's a difficult task. What are we doing here? Oh, it was the shit. Was the Miss Majesty sketch on there? I remember I had trouble linking to it. I don't know if it was on there. None of you mentioned it, so maybe it wasn't. Um, yeah, so for the rest of your comments, I think I got to everybody. Caitlin, critical race theory. Lou. Oh, Lou. Um, I talked about this with Team America at the beginning of the session. Lou was saying that a lot of it made her uncomfortable. And it's like I was just saying, right? Like, you got to find that sweet spot. You should feel a little bit uncomfortable, especially if these are the topics that we're addressing. We should feel uncomfortable, right? And we should question why we feel uncomfortable, and we should start to sort of wander down that introspective path to maybe think about things differently. Like, comedy's supposed to go there. Like, I think I said that. I know I said that to you guys in either a video or a thing. Um, so yeah, like, I would think that if Key and Peele heard you say that, they'd be like, perfect. Like, that's the point. A big part of this is, let's make people feel uncomfortable. They should feel uncomfortable about these things, right? Um, these are injustices and inconsistencies that we shouldn't tolerate anymore. Um, so yeah, I'm glad you were uncomfortable. If that, that makes sense in this context, obviously. But we talked about it with Team America. Same thing. Like, comedy is supposed to go there. It's one of the few sort of arenas in which we expect it to go there. Like, it's supposed to. It's sort of its job to go there. Um, yeah. So that's that. Oh, Nick. Yeah, Nick talked about the whole Aaron, right? The substitute teacher sketch, and I talk about this when I'm teaching it, in the past, but it's kind of emblematic of how our culture views comedy. That, I mean, millions and millions of people watch Key and Peele, and if you ask somebody about Key and Peele, typically they'll bring up the substitute teacher and the East West Bowl, right? With the crazy names, football players. And that right there is sort of a sad commentary, because this show is so about so much more than just like silly names. It just is. But since it's comedy, that's what people latch on to. Those became the most popular because they're the most ridiculous, they're silly, and they're not, they might be about something, but it's not as consequential. There's not as much at stake as these other sketches that I put on there. And it's the same with Chappelle. Like, if you bring up Chappelle's show to anyone from that era who watched it, they basically, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm Rick James, bitch." Like, we cling to and sort of appreciate the sort of lowest common denominator, right? And that's just our relationship with comedy. It's just supposed to make us laugh. Like, that's what I'm working against with classes like this, is like, no, you should think about it more than just that. Um, but so I was grateful for Nick for bringing up the substitute teacher sketch, because yeah, it's funny, right? But it's like Kevin Hart funny, where it's like, okay, yeah, I get it, it's funny, but what else you got, you know? Um, where these other sketches, and I think more often than not, Key and Peele sketches gave you that something else, um, in addition to being funny. Um, Jason, Aiden, and then a bunch of you brought up the Black Ice sketch, and I talked about Gabe brought it up. But the Black Ice and how we code language and media coverage and things like that. But the last one I'll talk about is Michelle. It was I My reaction to Michelle's comment was how to be gay, how to be black. Like, at this point in our culture, like, everyone thinks they can define it. Well, black means this, 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 and this. And gay means this, 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 and this. But what Key and Peele sketches are doing is showing that that's never the case, right? Gay is more than just the the office homophobe, right? And it brings up this question, like, there's no one way to be anything, right? There's, yes, there are, again, back to my what I opened with, like, we're all latent everything. There's no latent everything. Um, there's no one way to be a woman. There's no one way to be a man. There's no one way to be black. There's no one way to be gay. There's no one way to be straight. There's no one way to be bi. There's no one way to be whatever it is. Like, it, that doesn't seem like a difficult concept to grasp, but stereotypes don't, like, the way we use stereotypes sort of prohibits that thought, right? We want to categorize everything and put them, especially in white America. It's like, if you don't fit into this very sort of limited definition, then I don't get it. I can't relate. I don't, whatever it is. So if you're not, like, specifically, you see it on TV, and I guess we're getting better, but if you're not the kind of black person that we're comfortable with, right? That America is comfortable with, then you know, you're evil, or you're other, or we don't even acknowledge you. If you're not the kind of gay that makes, that we can sort of point and laugh at, like the over the top office homophobe guy, if you're not that, then we're uncomfortable. But why? If you don't conform to those rigid definitions that were established by no one, well, were established mostly by a white male patriarchal society, I guess. But if you don't fit into those, then we have a problem. Um, and I mean, is that not sort of how a lot of recent issues with race and gender and sexuality have become? Like, more and more people aren't fitting into the boxes that we've sort of constructed for them, and that is causing all of this nonsense and hatred and all this stuff. Ignorance is all based on more people wanting to be defined differently or understood differently. And that seems like, it doesn't seem like a big ask, but I guess it is. All right, that's my little Key and Peele thing, and I think I'm gonna do a BoJack Horseman video right now too, and that'll be my whole thing for the course. Okay. Have a good day, guys.